you can make your avatar speak and lip sync 60 plus languages.
The LSP would then just jump in and translate the text and then pop out the video, basically.
We want to help our customers connect with their communities, whether it's social media, whether it is SEO, whether it is ROI, whatever it might be.
Welcome everyone to SlatorPod 98. Hey there from Zurich.
Hey Florian, I'm still in London. How are you?
You're still in London. I'm okay. It's busy, but we podcast. That's what we do. Despite
we podcast
the year
on.
Closing.
Yeah.
We podcast on. There's no escape. Some people tell me, why did you commit to a weekly schedule? And I say, I don't know.
You tell me.
but now we're going to have to plow ahead.
Oh, yeah.
But today we have a fantastic guest. Really pleased to have John Fennelly, CEO of Lionbridge, joining us. You know, one of the language industry's most influential leaders. So it's going to be a big podcast. Going to be a big podcast, 98. Talking to John in, 15, 20 minutes. But first, let's go through a few capital allocation sessions. There's 3 deals we want to talk about. Might not even take 15 minutes. But my very favorite company in London, neighbors of yours, Synthesia, raised money. Not a language service provider, but the coolest tool on earth. And further up north, DA Languages switched owners, and we'll talk about that. And then Take One bought a transcription company. We've been covering transcription now from time to time, and I think this one's relevant as well. So, Synthesia. I like him. I don't like the name because it's hard for me to pronounce.
Yeah, it's hard for certain non-native speakers of English and those with a lisp. So, yeah,
Indeed.
Synthesia.
Yeah, the STHS combo, not good
it's
for
a
me.
lot.
That's not good for me. What happened with Synthesia? Well, they also raised a ton of money. They raised $50 million, and they're quite young, so this is a big round. I think Kleiner Perkins, one of the biggest VCs in the world, was their key investor for this one. And we remember we had Victor Ripperbelli on the pod in June 2021. So go back, listen to that if you're interested to learn more about Synthesia. We also have a transcript, so you can actually read the entire podcast. I love this. And we do the transcript using Descript, which is another fantastic tool. So they raised $50 million. What is Synthesia? Well, it's that AI video generation tool provider that you can use to create scripted videos using preloaded avatars, or you can create your own avatar, which I haven't done. But I think this is the enterprise package only. When you get the avatar you, and then they make you say things, right? So it's the lip movement. Basically, you type in content, and then your avatar says what you typed in various languages. So it's very much frontier tech. I love it. I used it, I don't know, about 5 or 6 times this summer and
you love doing it in presentations, don't you?
In presentations,
like German and English.
It breaks up the presentation flow. So I always throw all of these charts and stats at people, and then you have an avatar say something. So that kind of lightens things up a little bit. Again, let's not go too much into the details of the funding. So the reason why we're talking about is it because I think this is one of those kind of emerging markets for LSPs. It's one of those things, that one of those technologies that will create additional demand for language services. And we'll talk about that in a second. But maybe just go just very briefly, who is behind Synthesia. Again, it's Victor Ripperbelli, moved to London because he's originally from Copenhagen. He started the company together with a team of I think there is one co-founder,
Stefan,
and Stefan, yes, and 2 professors, mostly on I think it's video.
Computer vision professors.
Computer vision's professor. Yeah, exactly. So they also hire a bunch of PhDs and stuff. So it's kind of a deep tech company, as they call it. And he also mentioned that that's why one of the reasons he moved to London, because he's like, well, you can. There's a couple of places on Earth where you can pursue this type of work, it's probably, Silicon Valley, maybe Florida now, I don't know, and London, right? London, deep minds there, and some of the other very deep tech people and companies. So that's what they did, and we just went back to the podcast, and we spoke about deep fakes at the time, so go refer to that. And in the meantime, though, they've signed up 10,000 customers already. I would say that's probably individual subscribers, not enterprise accounts. And what they're doing is it's that kind of very standard, if hard way for SaaS companies to scale. So you go in, you have a light consumer subscription. Somebody from a major enterprise registers, right, plays around with it, loves the product, maybe tells a colleague or two, they sign up. And very soon you basically have a few people in a major org that are, individual subscribers. And then you go and try to get the enterprise deal. Right.
That's exactly it. I mean, when I spoke to Victor for the interview for this piece, I asked him about their marketing. He said, to be honest, we haven't done a lot of marketing to date. That mostly it's all kind of organic inbound, and it's exactly that. People sign up, they play around with it, and then it kind of, I guess, snowballs from there. To the enterprise potentially. So
tried and tested approach. I listened to this other podcast, the All In podcast, with a couple of VCs, and I mean they described this as well. David Sachs, one of the leading investors out in the Silicon Valley, he describes this as well. This is kind of tried and tested approach, because for you to go and close an enterprise account is really hard. So if you have a product that you can sell at the consumer level, and then they love it, and then they kind of evangelize and bring you into the enterprise. I'm repeating myself, but it's an interesting approach, and of course the product kind of speaks for itself. So that's why they haven't spent too much on marketing, and also we're doing a lot of marketing for them. There was also this Lock.io. No, what was it called? Lock.io. They're seeing this like a few LSPs and Constantine Ranch and all of that. So they've been pursuing this as well. So they're doing kind of secondhand marketing there. Anyway, why is this relevant for the language industry? Well, currently they cover 60 plus languages. So you can make your avatar speak and lip sync 60 plus languages, right? So that means, but it's of course depending on what you input as text. And so if you have a campaign in English and you want to make your avatar speak 20 languages, well, you need a LSP to do that, because you can't really MT that, because then the avatar is going to say weird things. So this is something that didn't exist 2 years ago at the consumer level. Now it does. And I think it'll generate quite a lot of work for LSPs if they're open to that, right? And back at the podcast, he said it's interesting for translation and language companies because what they are doing, what Synthesia is doing is actually massively expanding the market for translation. That's what he said, Victor. They also, I think, didn't tell you that they may add like a button or something to the platform?
Yeah, exactly. I was asking him really about an update on their partnership or working relationship with LSPs. I think he said there's a couple of partnerships, but nothing sort of really, really serious at the moment. However, in the future they are looking into it a lot, because obviously the multilingual aspect is very important for them and for their users. So he suggested, Victor did, that maybe one way would be to add a button or something in Synthesia where you can click to translate the video, which would then provide you as a user with access to, or maybe a couple of options for different language service providers, translation agencies, etc. So similar to what you might see in a kind of CMS almost,
or like in the Zoom or all these platforms where you have
almost like a marketplace where you can select from. Maybe you're going to say exactly that same thing, but like and this is a great opportunity potentially for LSPs to develop those kind of channel partnerships that we've talked about many times. And then he said, well, the LSP would then just jump in and translate the text and then pop out the video, basically. Very easy.
Victor's a busy man, but if I was an LSP, I'd ping him and I'd say, hey, why don't you do that translate button and add me to there as the preferred vendor? So
there you go.
Cool. Let's go to something slightly more conventional, public sector interpreting in the UK. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, a company, DA Languages, has swapped private equity backers really recently. So this was announced, I think, on the 2nd of December, so early in December. DA Languages announced that they switched their private equity backers. They were majority owned by Foresight Group, who had been their private equity backers since 2018. And IK Partners is the new firm, has just taken over as a majority owner, together with the management team of DA Languages, who have also reinvested, is what they told us. So this is a DA Languages public sector interpreting at its core. Like you said, they also service the private sector, as one might expect. In terms of revenue, so that I think 2020 to June, so I mean, about a year and a half ago now, but that's the most recent figures we have for them. They generated £9.6 million. What's that in dollars? I didn't do the conversion. 12?
I don't know, $12 million.
Yeah, ish. And then adjusted EBITDA of £1.6 million.
So we got that from, hang on, we got just.
That was Companies House.
Companies House.
From from the regulator that they filed a year and a half. Well, they filed more recently, but obviously it's going back a bit now to June, mid 2020. So yeah, I mean, it's in some ways reminiscent, although a lot smaller, of the Big Word deal. Obviously, earlier in the year, we saw the Big Word sell to a majority to private equity. Also, I mean, that's several magnitudes larger, but sort of a similar profile of companies servicing the public sector. Obviously, DA Languages a lot smaller, and I think pretty much exclusively UK based, whereas obviously Big Word a lot bigger and US clients also. But interestingly, the managing director of DA Languages was also at the Big Word for 5 years. So Matthew Taylor, their MD, he spent 5 years at the Big Word, and then latterly as the Global Director of Procurement and Continual Improvement. So, I mean, yeah, you had a bit of a hot take there, didn't you, on the private equity side in terms of money going in?
Yeah, I mean, it's just more money going to UK interpreting. But if I was placing bets, maybe I'd consider Germany at the moment, because I mentioned it at SlatorCon. And without going into too much depth, because I haven't read up on it too closely, but it appears that the new German government is now putting language access into, some complicated legal framework, which would allow doctors to recharge and hospitals to recharge remote interpreting to the health insurers, which in Germany I think are like quasi government. It's difficult to explain in English. Like the system, Switzerland has a similar system. It's they're kind of private entities, but they're kind of government mandated. Point being, you can recharge remote interpreting now to those insurance companies, which apparently they couldn't before. So imagine that, right? That's it's going to be quite the boost for remote interpreting. So if I was placing a few bets, maybe I'd look at Germany now. But yeah, the UK interpreting. In the meantime, let's go to the UK. The Big Word, DL Languages. So quite the activity.
Take one.
Okay, now we're moving to transcription and captioning. Also based in the UK. What's not based in the UK?
We do. I know everything that's good. No, I'm saying that because I'm here, but yeah. Now we're talking about a company, broadly speaking, a language service provider, acquiring another company, which is Take One. Therefore, the UK company is acquiring a company based in the US called Verbatim, but spelt verb and then number 8 TM. Verbatim. So I got distracted thinking about the name there. So Take One is acquiring Verbatim. Verbatim is a Maryland-based transcription and captioning company, as you said. Take One, they also do transcription and access services, but they're also a language services provider, and they focus predominantly on the media and entertainment, if not exclusively on that sector. Transaction is scheduled to close on the 31st of December. And obviously it's geared towards, the US, strengthening their position, expanding services, etc., gaining clients in the US. Take One, it's a relatively small, but they generated about 3.7 million pounds in 2020, so just shy of $5 million. That's what they told us for last year's LSPI. But they had some pretty strong growth up from 2019, so they actually grew 12% in 2020. Verbatim, also small, probably considerably smaller. They've got about 20 employees or so based on LinkedIn. I mean, we've reached out to them, so let's see if we manage to find out a bit more details about them. But I mean, it seems like Verbatim is more focused on that kind of access space. They actually have their roots in servicing the public radio market in the US, so providing accessible radio technology. So they actually rebranded from a name that was International Center for Accessible Radio Technology to Verbatim at some point in their history, and they expanded their markets. They now service also along with education and research and various other markets. They've sort of stayed a bit true to that core, but they look into also automatic speech recognition as well as human in the loop transcription. So an interesting transaction, and kind of similar to others that we've been discussing, albeit on a smaller scale.
Maybe they're going to get acquired by Verbit in the next couple of months. Who knows? I mean, Verbit, they got how much? How much did they get? 250 million? I don't recall, but a lot of money recently as well.
Yeah, it was $250 million.
Let's get back to the core of the localization industry, and one of the industry's most recognized names, of course, Lionbridge, and their CEO, John Fennelly. So catch you soon.
Exciting.
And welcome back, everybody. Welcome to SlatorPod today with John Fennelly, the CEO of Lionbridge. Hello, John.
Hello.
Hi, John.
How are you?
Welcome.
Hello.
All good. Where does this podcast find you today? What city, what country?
I am in the U.S., in the heart of New York City.
That's great. Was planning to go there last year. Didn't work, so hopefully coming back in 2022. So big.
Well, we've opened up for tourists, so you're more than welcome. Broadway is open.
Very nice.
Life is back. So Omicron aside, please feel free to come.
Yes. Planning for Q2. So big year, big time for Lionbridge. It's you're celebrating your 25th anniversary. Yeah. So tell us more about how you're celebrating this milestone, quarter century.
Yeah, it's been remarkable. I mean, you think about it, most companies don't last a year, let alone 2 years, let alone 25 years. So I think I read that the average life of an S&P 500 company is 17 years. And so really remarkable. Lots of change. Obviously, it's happened in the last 25 years. I think so much of the story of Lionbridge is the story of global technology. I mean, we've grown up in the technology industry. If you kind of can path chart of Lionbridge over 25 years and what big tech has done in 25 years, some of the big household names weren't even in existence 25 years ago. Some were fledgling and just beginning, but really it was the beginning of obviously a profound movement from a technology standpoint. And we've been very lucky to have been a participant, and I think a fairly vital part of the supply chain is they have really grown on a global basis. And along the way, we picked up a lot of other, customers. We've gotten into a lot of other verticals, and we've done a lot. So, an action-packed 25 years. I think there's the various phases of companies. We've survived. And, I think what's really important for us, and we've really tried to focus on this year, is celebrating what's happened. And very proud of the fact that we made it to 25 years, but recognizing that, what got us through 25 years isn't necessarily going to get us to the next 25 years. And so what do we have to do for a company to stay relevant? What do we have to do to really thrive and grow, have a wonderful place for our folks to work, deliver for customers? And what do we need to do? What do we need to do differently? How do we have to think about technology, and how do we plan for this year, next year, the following year, that we think will give us the foundation to really grow, hopefully well into the future for another 25 years.
Yeah, so there's lots to celebrate. From your personal background a little bit, you had key leadership roles before with like Thomson Reuters, Hireright. Yeah. Just tell us a bit more about that, how you got into this industry. I think you've been at Lionbridge now for 4.5 years. So just prior to Lionbridge?
Yeah, interesting career journey, and I would have never thought that I would have gotten into some of the things that I did. But somebody said to me once, years and years and years ago, some very wise, successful person, who was going to give me the keys to success. And when I was a young person, he said to me that timing was everything. And it's taken me a very long time to really appreciate what that meant. And I think, as I say to people with their careers, you really try to put yourself in a position that when opportunities come, that you have the ability to take advantage of them. And so, at Thomson Reuters, I ran a $1 billion division for us that was, quite successful and grew quite rapidly, when I was lucky enough to be there. And really a fantastic experience. And then I took a big leap of faith. I didn't have to leave, and then I was offered an opportunity to become the CEO of a company in the HCM or human capital management space. And that was a big sea change for me and very different. I had been in financial services most of my life, and then took a risk at that point in my life and to leave a very nice company and fairly good stable job. And did it. And, it turned out to be the best decision I think I ever made. And, it says a lot about, I think, how to manage your career and where you have to take some chances and opportunities. But it really gave me the opportunity to go out and do something different, different customer base, really build out a lot of things that I'd worked on for years on focusing on customers and technology, et cetera. And then that worked out quite well. And then I was looking for something else to do, and the Lionbridge opportunity came my way. And it was attractive on multiple fronts. Complicated company where we were a public company that had gone private, big global footprint, lots of countries, lots of complexity. Some of my friends have said, why did you ever get involved with that? It's like all you do is work, right? And that's why I like hard stuff, right? So, but it's been fascinating 4.5 years. I've loved the language industry. I love the people, I think, more than anything else in the language industry. And it's been, and I've been very, very fortunate to have a lot of things that have come my way, particularly in the last 4.5 years, and really getting to travel the world pre-corona. And we could talk a little bit about that, but and I think I was fortunate enough to go out and meet so many people that once we got internally and with customers, and that once we moved to a remote world, it was easier. I think it would have been a little bit harder if that had happened just as I had taken over the company. But that is probably another story for another day.
John, so most, if not the vast majority of our listeners will be familiar with Lionbridge. But I mean, for those maybe small few that aren't, can you give us a sense of the size, the breadth of the company, just in terms of, staff, offices, revenue, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So we have close to 6,000 people in the company. We do well north of, well over $500 million in revenue. We did significantly more than that before we invested in our AI business. We operate in 27 countries, 27 countries, 51, 52 offices. So fairly wide reach globally, and the majority of our employees are outside of the United States, actually.
So, for you and for the company, the past 25 years, you mentioned before, like 25 years, the average lifespan of a company, 17 years, and then some of the big tech customers you have are probably even younger than 25 years. So. Yeah. But let's look back a little bit at the milestones. Even though you have, we weren't there for the whole 25 years, but can you just give us 2, 3, 4 key milestones of the company? Going public, going private, and then maybe with the customer side, technology side as well.
Yeah, it's really good to think about it that way. There's multiple milestones, but I think there were probably from a Lionbridge standpoint some acquisitions that were foundational, and so. Predates me certainly, but I think, the Bound acquisition, this goes back a lot of years for Lionbridge. Lionbridge had gone public. It had come, Rory had started the company, did a phenomenal job growing it, and, it made some really smart acquisitions. And I think the story at Lionbridge was a story of acquisitions, as you would know with CLS. But I think the Bound acquisition, Bound was actually, I believe, bigger than Lionbridge at the time, and Lionbridge acquired Bound and really gave Lionbridge a big global footprint. And even today, we still have lots of just wonderful employees that came from Bound. and Berlitz that was purchased by Bound, obviously a big name in the language industry. And I think there were a couple of other acquisitions that I would fit into that bucket that were, quite transformational and foundational to really driving Lionbridge to what it became. And then I think just things along the way in the industry, TMs were a big change in the industry. I think the financial crisis in 2008 was a big challenge for the industry. And I get big seismic events, acquisitions, changes in technology, economic events. And I think those are probably, 3 or 4 that were fairly significant in the 25-year history of Lionbridge.
And so you came from, the wealth management side of Thomson Reuters, very much in the financial space. So when you joined, what were some of the key learning, or have been some of the key learnings for you over the past 4 years going into this business that serves like every other business under the sun, like including a lot of the big names in tech? What were some of the key learnings for you?
Yeah, so there are multiple. There is a complexity to the language business that is remains inherent, confounding in some respects, and I think it is an industry in transition, and ripe for transition. That is one. I think I thought about the business. I still think about it exactly the same way. You have content. You enhance that content for customers and you bring value and then you deliver it back. And so, the way I look at it in a very simplistic way is the customer transfers their complexity and formats to you. You figure out how to normalize that content. You get it to a data enhancer, our beautiful community of translators. They enrich it. You send it back to the customer. Sounds quite simple, right? Sounds very easy. As we know, and I spent 2 hours earlier this morning for the umpteenth meeting I've had about, trying to break down various parts of the workflow, automation. How do we do that? How do we use AI, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, to your question, I don't think I underestimated, because I think things are complex in life, but there's an inherent complexity of this business that I think everybody's grappling with right now. And it remains. Somebody's going to crack the code. I think it's us. And I think it's going to be a big sea change in the business.
And coming back to something that you mentioned, you were talking about, I think, most of Lionbridge's employees being outside of the States, and also having, thousands, nearly 6,000 employees. How is your experience of managing, that kind of number of employees? And then also, you mentioned that maybe doing this remotely would have been challenging day one if COVID, et cetera, had happened when you joined. But how's the remote first working world impacted the day-to-day at Lionbridge?
Yeah, remote's been really, for all companies, I think we've all kind of gotten the same boat. I think originally, if you go back 2 years, almost, 2 years to the day, I was very worried. I go back to, January of 2020, we saw this thing coming out of China. We've got a big outpost in China. We've got a couple offices, a lot of people. And so something's happening. And there's, like all of us, news of Wuhan and something's happening and it's going to get bigger. And then, there was a point not long after that I was thinking, we've got to get everybody remote. We've got to figure out a way to get everybody in this company to remote. And it was fairly daunting for us, for all the locales that we're in, and thinking, can we get enough equipment to people? Can we get people home? Do they have broadband? Can they support customers? What's going to happen to customers? And, I think we were all, pleasantly surprised, most companies, that, knowledge workers actually adapted pretty well to remote work. We have been, and I think this is an important point, and I think maybe talks a little bit to your first question. We have been very consistent since day one, and we said we trust everybody. I know lots of companies have tried to monitor productivity. They're very worried about productivity. There's a lot of people that are, that monitor, what people do on networks during this period of time. And I said, listen, I trust our employees to do the right thing. We know people will do their work. We also are cognizant that people have lives, and life is complicated, and they have families and elderly relatives and kids and dogs and lots of stuff that need to be looked after. And I think that's worked really well for us. We have trusted our employees. I think they know that. I think we have had, I think we've had a very good, I don't know if I'll call it a cultural revolution, but a cultural change at Lionbridge in the last 4.5 years, which to me is unequivocally the hardest thing that you can do in a company is to shape and change a culture. It's easy to change policies and procedures. Anybody can do that, right? But to actually have people adhere to them, believe in the vision, believe where you're going is quite difficult, right? And that back to your earlier question on, managing remotely and then, but a global workforce, which is a challenge unto itself. And it's a complicated world that we live in today. And I think the job of somebody like me as a CEO is to try and influence, to try to provide direction and guidance and goals that everybody can get their head wrapped around and say, okay, that makes sense to me. I think you have to communicate a lot. You have to communicate effectively, and you have to communicate in a way that people understand what you're talking about, right? And it's visceral to them. They're real life examples. And so I spend quite a bit of time on a weekly basis communicating with the company, on a very broad range of subjects, on certainly things that I'm personally interested in at times, where I think they dovetail into what the company's interested in. I have been I think very consistent. We set out 3 or 4 priorities from day one with the company, and first was simplification. And try to simplify a very complex organization. I think that is probably holds true of most companies that have become quite complex over the years. And I think when I was here originally, everybody said, "Who's this guy with simplification?" Only talks about simplification, right? And simplification to me is, how do we make it easier for our customers to do business with us? And how do we? And I think a lot of companies fail on this one. How do you make it much easier for your people to do business with customers? And then we also, the other 2 priorities were people and customers. And, I've always been a believer that if you take care of your people and they believe in what you're doing, then all kinds of benefits will manifest itself from that. You will have people that would be very interested in taking care of your customers. They'll believe in what you're doing. And I think, fortunately, I can look back now 4.5 years later, and I think, by and large, we've been pretty successful on all of those measures.
You mentioned that one of the goals was to make it easier for the clients to do business with you. Did that? How did that attempt at simplification transfer into the organization? You got the geographies, you got the matrix, you got the verticals. Yeah. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, everything kind of goes to the pendulum in companies, right? You go matrix, you go vertical. Everybody wants control. The world's going to end if everybody doesn't report to everybody, and you try to strike the happy medium. And I think I'll take it up a step, right? And I think what I came into was a company that was very internalized and was very focused on internal operations. I've always come at it with, okay, so what does the customer think, right? What is the customer's view? What's important to the customer? As I said, we were an inside out company. We were worried about the inside of our operations versus, how that fit into customers. And I said, no. We've got to become an outside in organization, really focused on customer demands. Why do customers want things? How are we building solutions for customers? I don't care that we're building solutions that make us feel better because internally something worked a little bit better. If it doesn't work better for a customer, it doesn't work for me. And so that's been a big change. Now we've organized in a way to try to get scale and to try to rationalize and be smart about things, which is, I think an ongoing effort on our side. You're always tweaking organizations. You're always trying to optimize. You're always trying to empower. There's always that perfect tension between scale, accountability, control that everybody has, and I don't think a day goes by that I'm not in a vigorous debate with somebody who wants to change the way we are or doesn't believe that we're going to get scale this way. And so if you're into organizational design and you're into complex organizations, run a company with 50 offices in 27 countries and 6,000 employees, and you'll have some fun.
Yep, it's fascinating. Well, let's maybe discuss briefly some other external factors.
Sure.
When we think about the competitive landscape.
Yeah.
I mean, from our perspective, generally, the core translation localization market is extremely competitive. So what do you think, what can you share about your view on the dynamics of competing both with sort of other rival leading super agencies, and at the same time these kind of tech enabled, maybe emerging or new, some of the VC funded players in the space also.
Yeah, I mean, just as one interesting thing, and you guys write about this, more than anybody, and I think keep everybody apprised of the space. I mean, as you well know, probably even more than I do. I mean, there's a lot of money that continues to come into the space, right? VCs, private equity money, and follow the money. So smart people think there's something happening in the space, obviously, as do I. But I think on the competition side, listen, I always respect our competition. We've got a lot of great competitors that are out there. I'm not really worried about the competition, and and there's no hubris in that whatsoever. I'm super respectful always of competition. But I know the big super agencies, like I kind of know what they're about, what they have to offer, and it is what it is. And I think we compete very effectively with our focus on customers, technology, et cetera. I think we're winning market share. I think, we bring great value to our customers of scale and breadth and customer intimacy. And that those are things that we're quite focused on. I'm always more worried about what I don't know, right? And so are there the proverbial two people in a garage somewhere that are developing discontinuous technology that's going to be completely disruptive to the industry? Now, we've seen things that look like they're emerging in the space that, they get to a point, they don't seem to be able to scale more. Somebody will, right? And so that's what I worry about. And again, no disrespect to any of, the kind of the named competitors that we've got in the space, because they're all, I think, very good companies, lots of good people in the space. As a plug for Lionbridge, I would say, which one of the things that's always a litmus test for me is we have a lot of people from within the industry that now want to join Lionbridge. And that's always to me like, okay, that tells me that we're doing the right thing, and in a very competitive labor market, right? And so I think and I take and I take great pride in that. But I think it's a fascinating time in the language space right now. Technology will change; it is changing the language space, we can kind of see what the end game looks like. It's just we're racing to get there.
So the end game, would you see the end game as the AI agency? Because last time we met was in San Francisco in 2019. We had Tom Tungush, VC on the stage, and he coined that term. Or someone else coined the term AI agency. He brought it up. Do you think that's where it's all going? Like basically, fundamentally, these companies, LSPs, will be at the core. There's a piece of AI, and then they lay the kind of agency model on top of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I look at it that way. That was a great presentation, by the way. I do remember it. But so I look at this there, I think about content. I come actually not from the wealth management world as much as the content world, right? And even in the human capital management, everything I've been involved in was technology and content and content and content. And that's the commonality, right? That far outweighs the differences. And so we've got big, audacious goals that we want to basically democratize localization, translation, and say, okay, give us all of your content, and you can localize anything that you want, right? Now, easier said than done. There's huge amounts of content that are out there, right? But as we see, we want to drive customer intimacy. We want to drive, and we, our vision is breaking barriers and building bridges. And, I don't think that's ever been more apropos. We want to help our customers connect with their communities, whether it's social media, whether it is SEO, whether it is ROI, whatever it might be. How do we help them push more content in the right language and the right inflection into the hands of people that need that content, right? Like that's the end game, right? And so how do we do that at a cost level that they now can push way more content into their ecosphere than they possibly can because of various, systems constraints, content management system constraints, complexity constraints, cost constraints, whatever it might be, right? And so I think the way the industry is set up today is still very manual, right? And you can't get to that level of scale in the current operating model, right? So something's got to give, and it will. I mean, you think about a lot of the things that are in the LSP in the LSP space today, and I kind of this is sometimes it's helpful to come from the outside, sometimes it's not, like in any business, right? And you learn a lot of things. But what I still sometimes come to the outside, I still look around and think, okay, I could name 10. This is still too manual. If I look at it and I came into the space, I've never believed this is manual. I would think this would be automated, this particular part, right? And so somebody's going to get it. Somebody's going to figure it out. It's AI driven. It's knowing more about content. It's routing content. There's a variety of things to go into it, but I think that is the future, right? And I think some companies were early. And like any time you find new things, there's people that figured it out a long time ago. They were just early. They didn't have the funding. They couldn't stay long enough to see the vision come true. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. There's lots of things that are happening. 2 years ago, there was a couple of companies. They looked like they were just emergent. They kind of plateaued a little bit. Why? Right? And then what's coming that's new? What's some of the funding? Where's it going? And so I think the next 3 or 4 years in this space, absolutely fascinating.
So where Lionbridge has really been successful, was successful, is what with the spin-off of your AI business. So I'm not sure how much you can share about that, but that was a quite the bombshell for the industry. And also when you spoke just now, we're talking about content, about localization, about translation again. So Lionbridge really became a core lock and language services, language tech player again. What can you share about that spin-off? Because it's $1 billion. People were like, "Wow!" Just tell us a bit more.
Yeah, well, we've been very fortunate, I think, for the last 4.5 years. We have a board and an ownership group that is highly invested in success, is very smart. And I think we have a very aligned view of the future. And so, we got into this business. We took Lionbridge private. The idea was that we thought that there was a tremendous amount of runway in the language space, and nothing has dissuaded that view in the last 4.5 years. Along the way, we unearthed and really, I think allowed our crowd-based business to flourish. And particularly I spent quite a bit of personal time on that, and we don't. We think more about that business as a crowd-based business, and we were able to I think scale that, and we love that business. And we just had somebody who came to us, and and from a financial standpoint, it made a lot of sense. And and Telus was the buyer. I think it's worked out extremely well for them, and I think so. So I think it was what you always want in life is a win-win situation, which doesn't always happen. I think in this case it was. What it's allowed us to do is really get back to our core and focus on where we think we can create a lot of value for our customers, for our shareholders, for our employees, in really taking what we think we're a leader in the industry. And really, really accelerating what we think we can do over the next couple of years, and that's the primary rationale behind it. And I think if I sit now 11 months on from the transaction, so we culminated the transaction at the very end of last year, and then we think about where we are here in late December of 2021, and we've grown. Our localization business has flourished this year. Our strategy has continued to work on what we focused on, key growth verticals, our automation initiatives, our technology initiatives. So everything that we plan is in flight. And I think as we look back 11 months, I think things have gone as planned, which doesn't always happen in life. So we're pretty happy about that. And I think as we focus on the future, it is very much on the language side of the business, not on the crowd business for us. And the crowd business for us in the AI was not. Yes, there were some language components, but really it was much more of a crowd-based business than what you would think is traditional LSP.
Okay, well, I mean, sticking with the core of translation localization, let's talk a little bit about translation technology and TMS. I mean, I think as far as I'm aware, Lionbridge's got a wide range of TMS management system, and owns pretty much all of that end-to-end piece. But I mean, what are your plans for, or are there any plans for developing that and potentially licensing, the technology externally in a SaaS model or some other way?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we have, as I think some of the listeners would know, have not licensed technology as some of our competitors are around translation management systems. And that was the decision that was made, predating me. And I've thought long and hard about that, and we've looked at, partnering with a lot of, I think some of the smaller technology companies that have come up. And there's quite a few, as you know, and there's been quite a bit of M&A activity in that space, and the valuations on some of those assets has been extremely high. So kudos to some of the people that I think had vision and developed those applications. So our current view is to continue to bolster our own technology. We think we have a very strong tech stack, and we have done a few partnering deals in certain verticals where it's made sense for us. It's a means to an end for us, and for managing effectively projects. And we'll continue to look at it, but our current thinking is that we like where we are. We think our technology is what is needed, certainly to get us to the next level, our content, AI, et cetera. We've recently made some very large investments in people in our space, and in the technology space, we'll continue to try to allocate more capital to our technology teams and build out where we think are fairly ambitious roadmaps. But as of now, we will continue to develop, and if appropriate, and where we think it makes sense strategically, then we would either acquire or license, add-on pieces for us.
Now, we talked about the kind of the workflow component. Of course, you also touched on AI, but like, how deep do you think should a large LSP go, or what are your thoughts on in machine translation, right? Kind of one of the foundational pieces here. Do you want to own like the full stack, like really develop from scratch from these kind of open source frameworks, or are there certain components that you think that are more that lend themselves more to licensing? Just your thoughts on that.
So we've never been in the game of trying to develop our own MT engines, and there's a lot of really good stuff, as you guys know, that's out there. And so, our view is always to try and optimize what's best for our customers and try to pick the engines, for language sets that make the most sense for customers. And that will continue to be the way we operate. And we want to provide as much choice as possible to customers and really provide the highest level of return for them per language. And so that's been our strategy in the past. That will continue to be our strategy, building lots of pieces in what we call smart content and smart MT around that, but really giving customers choices. And so I don't envision us building out proprietary MT engines, but continue to work with a series of whether open source or partner-fed MT engines that we then will license for customers.
Got it. Well,
I don't. We've never seen, and maybe we're wrong, but we've never seen that we would gain a competitive advantage by doing something differently.
No, it's interesting because there are some, especially on the startup side, right? That's their supposed secret sauce, that they're basically owning the MT and can customize it much better. But so far we haven't seen it. I'm like making an actual dent in competitiveness, at least over the past 5 years.
Yeah, like again, as we talked about, there's some people, I think, some really good ideas, interesting. I think you get to a point of diminishing return though, and that you spend a lot of money and a lot of time that you can just get with off the shelf stuff. So we'll see.
That's interesting take. So for 2022, let's say it's happening in we're getting there in 3 weeks. So what are some of the most exciting initiatives and projects you have for Lionbridge in 2022? And then after that, your vision for the industry, 3-5 years, whatever the time frame you want to pick.
Yeah. So for 22, we've been the history of Lionbridge has been, we made a lot of acquisitions up until we got here, and then we've really been focused more on organic growth than anything else. And so we've been active in the M&A front. And we'll see what happens there. I mean, that's not our strategy going into 2022, but continues to I think if we see things that make sense. Along what is our strategy or strategic verticals, we'll continue to focus on technology. Life sciences, games is our big growth verticals. We're very bullish on Europe, Asia. We have, what's kind of interesting in life in this very polarized world that we live in on multiple fronts. What I've continued to talk a lot about in the last 4 years, I've seen no pullback by big companies on chasing global markets, right? I haven't seen anything. We have had one customer that I've seen a budget pullback and saying, "Oh no, we're not going to try and grow. We're going to pull back. We're going to retrench. We're going to focus on a domestic market." And so I think, despite all of the noise that's out there on the political front and the media front, big companies will continue to grow. And I think the localization industry is pretty well positioned to be a participant in that. And I think, it's very specific to 2022. I think what we've been doing on our product side, our technology side, we have our kind of year-end, beginning of the year kickoffs coming up. We've been planning for, and I think we have more going on right now than we've ever had. On what we're trying to do with smart content, with AI, and so we have ambitious plans. And I think the question for us, can we execute everything that we have envisioned, and can we get it all done in 22, 23? But we're very excited about, the upcoming year. We're thrilled about, what we've been able to do this year. And, hopefully that will continue as we move into the new year.
Onward to the next quarter of a century. So
yeah.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks so much for taking the time today, John. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thanks,
John. Well, thanks very much for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.